Hey, why don't we go ahead and get started? So hello, everyone. Welcome to Ask the Grant Writing Expert. I'm Dr. Meg Bouvier. You know me as the creator of your library of NIH grantsmanship courses. I have over 35 years of experience at NIH as an applicant, an intramural researcher, a staff writer, and now as a full-time NIH grant mentor. I've helped clients land over $500 million in federal funding, and I'm here to answer your NIH grant writing questions. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. So if you're attending live, just a reminder that you're in listen-only mode, so you can type your questions into the Q&A box. If you have comments, you can put them into the chat box. And if you are watching this as a recording on our YouTube channel or within our learning management system, just a disclaimer that everything we say is true to the best of our knowledge as of November 1st, 2023, but always check the NIH website or your program officer to make sure that the information is still accurate, because things change very quickly at NIH. Things that are happening in the library right now, as of about 2 hours ago, we have just dropped our newly updated Master the T32 course. So if you've ever dreamed of writing an institutional training grant, this might be a good time to do that. It's hot off the presses. So go ahead and check that out. For those of you who are research development people, although I'm scanning the list and it looks like none of our RD people are on, there is a conference going on for research development people. The acronym is NORDP, NORDP, and I am presenting at that on Friday. So if any of you are attending that conference, feel free to come. And of course, the big update at NIH is that they have finalized their decision to change the scoring criteria. That's not happening until January. Deadline's January 25th or after 2025. So we have over a year to discuss that. So we are not going to discuss it today. So instead, today, it is my great pleasure to welcome Agnella Izzo Matic. So Agnella came in my direction, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago at this point. So like me, she has a PhD in a biomedical science area, and began life as a researcher and then transitioned into writing. And I absolutely loved her writing. I still love her writing. And she very graciously agreed to write a blog post for us and to appear today to speak about what she's doing now, which I think will be helpful to you. So Agnella, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm glad to join for
your sound, there's something wrong with your sound. I'm just going to pause you for 1 sec. Let's see if it's working better now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's perfect now.
Okay, sorry about that. Glad to be joining you for this edition of Ask the Grant Writing Expert. Thanks so much for having me join and to continue working together. I have equally fond memories of starting working together, 10 plus years ago too. So glad to get to do this again. Before launching, for those of you who are unaware, before launching my company, AIM Biomedical, I was a tenure track faculty member at Northwestern University for a few years. And in my brief academic career, I was involved with writing probably 15 to 20 grant applications. So, I have some definite firsthand experience with what this process is like. So some of what I'll talk to you today is about, it comes from those years of experience. And I'm joining Meg today to talk to everybody about how to take this grant application that you worked so hard on and use it as a base to write your scientific manuscripts. So I mentioned I founded the company AIM Biomedical about 11 years ago. And since then, I've been helping researchers and companies communicate about their data, essentially, to make sure that we're communicating about it clearly and targeting the right audiences and doing it in a comprehensive and ethical way. About half of our work currently is scientific publications, so manuscripts, conference abstracts and presentations and other similar materials. So looking to getting started. Thank you.
All right. So let's see, we do have a question here. And this is related to, and I actually want to open some other questions that we have. Okay, so the question is, and it's funny because this actually kind of dovetails with another question that somebody asked, also having to do with transition to independence. So let me pull that one up. Actually, there are 3 questions having to do with transition to independence. And if anybody wants to, post any questions about manuscript writing and the differences between grant writing and manuscript writing and transitioning from one to the other, or any questions whatsoever about manuscript writing, let's pick Agnella's brain while she's here. So the question is, between my master's and PhD, I worked in the same field, epidemiology, as a researcher for 12.5 years at a community-based hospital. Then I decided to pursue an academic career and currently a tenure track assistant professor at an R1 university. By this time, I had secured several grants, not R01 level, but more programmatic funds from foundations and pharma companies. Technically, I'm considered ESI because I completed my PhD in 2021. Do you think a record such as this might weigh if I apply for a K? Like, I'm assuming a mentored K. I'm really struggling deciding between a small R or a K. I don't want to put in the K work if I have no chance for a K given my work history. So I get versions of this question a lot having to do with transition to independence from a non-traditional background. So sometimes it's people who have worked in industry for a while, or people from other countries where they, didn't have an opportunity to apply for federal funding because they weren't in the US system. So there are often versions of this question. So you could certainly apply for a K. When you say, I don't want to put in the K work if I have no chance for a K, I'm always a big fan that if you write a grant application in general, there's always some way to shop it around to multiple places. So if you're going to put in the work to, like the research project of a K could always be broken out. If the K isn't funded and you decide you're not going to pursue the K, it could be broken out and submitted as an R21 or an R03, depending on the kind of budget and that you're looking for and the NOFOs available. So, it really depends on, you probably have a fair number of publications and you would probably be appealing to reviewers at the R level because you have a fair number of publications and you've already landed some grant applications. So there would be nothing wrong with trying an R21, but I also kind of feel like if you thought you needed some mentoring and really did want to do the K, you could give it a shot and just see how reviewers react to that. And if you decide not to pursue that, you could break out the research project and then submit, that work is not for nothing, like you can always take that and shop that around someplace else for some other funding source, even simultaneously for foundation funding. So there were several other questions having to do with transition to independence. So let's see. I'm looking for, there was one about a DP5. Here it is. Please address how to balance the presentation of mentorship versus readiness for independence in a DP5 proposal. Clearly, the entire thing is geared toward early independence, but at the same time, mentorship is essential at all career stages. In particular, I'm wondering about how to best discuss the mentorship structure without sounding overly reliant on a mentor. So for those who don't know, the DP5 is one of the 4 mechanisms in the high risk, high reward portfolio that's funded out of the Office of the Director, out of the Common Fund. So it's not sponsored by an institute per se. And it's a 12-page application, but it doesn't follow the traditional structure. It has like specific questions. And it's really meant for people who are like look so appealing in terms of their productivity and the how innovative their ideas are, that they're skipping the postdoc phase. You're kind of fast tracking. These are extremely competitive awards. The funding lines tend to be quite low on them, which isn't to discourage anybody from applying, because, somebody's got to get them. So, if you feel like you would be competitive, feel free to do that. But really, this is a question of, in any mechanism where you're transitioning to independence, if it's a mentored K, a K99R00, a DP5, how do you balance that mentorship piece with the independence piece? So I would say that if you're applying for a DP5, you're trying to sell the reviewers on the idea that you don't need something like a postdoc or a mentored K, that you're really going to transition to independence very quickly. So you want to scale back on the whole mentoring piece of it. You do want to talk about you being a mentor. That's something that is specific in the instructions. I actually double checked that before we came on. But I would limit the discussion to mentoring to, something along the lines of, I'm leading this, and the mentor is going to oversee it to make sure, like, I'm going to do like supervised readings with that person. Maybe I'm going to do a stint in their lab to learn a technique. Maybe they're going to supervise me as I do X, Y, and Z, whatever that might be. But you're leading it and they're overseeing it, as opposed to a mentored K, where the mentoring plan is really detailed and built out, because the assumption is that you don't have that expertise. So that's my recommendation on a DP5, is to scale way back on the mentoring discussion. Okay, and returning to the Q&A box, what advice do you have for faculty who are trying to simultaneously write publications and grants? So Agnella, I'm going to let you take that one.
Sure, thank you. Yes. Well, so I saw the question pop up and I had a couple moments to think about it. My answer, I think, is it depends. I think it depends on a few things, such as, how much synergy or overlap there is between the grant, if there's one specific grant and one specific publication that are really the top tier priorities for you. How much overlap is there between these two items, and can you kind of knock out the two birds with one stone idea of, let's say the method sections are very similar, or, the introduction and kind of the lead up of the story, are overlapping materials. I would say try to work on the synergistic sessions first to, see get that overlap part out of the way, and then, put the two pieces separate, and then, add the other individual elements into each of those that are applicable for each of them. I also think it depends somewhat in the grant writing and publishing in academia. I have always found it very much to be the catch-22, right? Of, you can't secure grant. Usually, you can't secure grant funding without publications. But how do you get publications without having the experiments that are funded, to get the data to publish? So, I think if you're in that type of a situation of like, I need to work on both, but I'm starting from scratch on both of them, which one is more important to work on first? I think if you are an early investigator, if you have a little bit of institutional funding, I would say try to knock out enough experiments that you can get a solid preliminary data section for a grant application, and fingers crossed, that maybe is enough data that you can also try to publish it, even if it's in the form of like a short communication, brief report type of a. But it is, if you can, it's always hard to balance the quantity of workload that faculty, I think, are expected to do both in the grant applications and with all of us. When we get busy, we have to make choices. So if you can pull in other lab members, co-PIs, even, you know, another faculty in your department to just read something over and give you some feedback on. Any of those resources that you can pull on, I think, can be helpful in moving the needle forward on either the grant application or the manuscript.
Yeah, and I would add to that that you know, the you can't, it's like Agnella said, you can't get a grant without publications, and you can't get publications without the grant. But it has to start somewhere, and for most people, it's going to start with their startup funds and campus grants. So those are, you know, like, hopefully you have some sort of a startup package, and hopefully most campuses have some sort of less competitive internal mechanism that you can apply for. And it's really meant to be your first foray into grant writing. So, you know, like, it's really meant for people to learn how to, you know, write a grant application, get critiques, rewrite, put it in again, serve as a reviewer. It's kind of a first step. And so hopefully you can get your hands on a little money that way. They tend to be somewhere in the $20,000 to $60,000 range, those campus grants. And then hopefully with those two pieces of funding, you can generate enough preliminary data to then be competitive, like at a private foundation. And then, you know, you're working on experiments and submitting to a private foundation, and then maybe you land a private foundation grant, and that's like 100,000, something like that. And then with that money, you can do some experiments and put in for a small format NIH grant, like a K or one of the small format Rs, and keep doing it that way. But if you are thinking of applying at the R mechanism at NIH, that's kind of, you know, like, it's already in the major leagues. Like, you already have to demonstrate success on things like campus grants and foundation grants. And what is the operational definition of success in those instances? It's having landed a competitive award and published on it. So unless you publish on the last grant you got, you're never going to get the next one. And that's true for R01s also. If you land an R01 and you don't publish off it, you're never going to get another one. So,
you know, I just had a thought too of kind of, once you land that grant, as you're conducting experiments, I almost think that you can start filling out a manuscript. You can start filling out a manuscript with just bare bones results and like, you know, outlines of like, here are the methods we did, here are the results we did. And you can really slowly, as you're moving through your experiments, fill stuff out, maybe take a set of results out that you realize is not actually as important as you initially might have thought. But starting to do that throughout the process of conducting your experiments and gathering the data, rather than waiting until some magical moment happens at the end of the experiment and try to bite everything off at that point for writing the manuscript. Because it can be, I mean, I do it full time. It's a heavy lift to go from just the data to a submitted and published manuscript. It's a lot of work. So if you can iteratively do that while the results are still fresh in your mind, and maybe you had a great idea when you were in the middle of the experiments of like, oh, I saw the data come out looking like this, and you know, there might be some implications for X, Y, and Z, and I want to go into the literature and take a look at, you know, what's already been published along those lines. Having those ideas fresh in your head, I think, can just help the process.
Yeah. When I was in grad school, my thesis advisor gave me great advice, which was exactly that. Start writing the manuscript from the first experiment. And she was a big believer that the act of writing it would reveal the holes in the logic that that you have to fill in order to publish. So, it's very
Definitely.
easy to run experiments like this sounds interesting and that sounds interesting, but you've got to have it all hang together in a cohesive publication. And so every day she would make us sit down at the end of the day and add something to the evolving publication. And we were all, and the act of writing reveals those holes. And that was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. The other thing that I want to say is that, especially as people are priming this grant publication pump, I think it's really important to shotgun your applications. And by that, I mean, if you write, like the K applicant we were just where we were just answering that question, if you've gone through the agony of writing an NIH grant application, an R21 or a K, you can submit that. You can't have the same science and review at another place at NIH simultaneously, but you can and should have it in review at other places. So you can break off an AIM or the whole project and submit it for private foundation funding, or submit it to another federal agency, and you can have that going on simultaneously. May you be so lucky to, knock on wood, that more than one of those awards comes through. The program officers are used to dealing with a situation like that, and they'll help you sort out who's going to fund what, or if you're going to turn down the non-NIH project or whatever. But and that kind of saves you time and agony, because you're getting you're shopping it. Once you've gone through the agony of writing it, shop it around until somebody gives you some money to do some part of it. So, okay, so what are some important steps that we need to remember after submitting an NIH application? I submitted a grant in our series in mid-October and have not received any updates regarding the status of the application or where the application has been assigned to. Is that normal? I don't do much with post-award, but I would think that you should have gotten, I would ask your pre-award support office if they have any information on that. I don't know, that's somewhere in ERA Commons, and I don't know how quickly the assignment happens. If it was on October 5th, R01, it's not quite a month. And I know that things are kind of slow at NIH right now because nobody has a budget. So we're in a continuing resolution. So that may be part of the reason why it's slow. Yeah, go on ERA Commons and see if there's anything there. And if you're not seeing anything, ask your pre-award support office or post-award support people if that's common, because I don't know what the timing is on that, because I'm usually not part of that process because there's no writing involved. So yeah, but that it may be delayed because of the continuing resolution and things being slow at NIH right now. So I had another question related to how to structure one's time when it comes to launching a career. I've gotten my first R01 since starting with Meg's content. So for me, I would love to see where do you go from here session. I love grant writing. I'm finding that sometimes I like the writing more than the doing. Being funded kind of sucks, which I have to laugh at that because I have had so many clients who are like, oh my God, I got a notice of award. Oh my God. Now I have to do it. That's happened so many times. Anyway, I have this instinct to write grant after grant after grant, but now that I'm funded, I know I need to chill for a bit, or do I? I would love next thoughts. So Agnella, do you have an opinion about that one?
Well, I have made a career out of writing, as have you. So I think there are ways to do it, certainly whether you're in academia or not. I think you could certainly find, staff, postdocs, grad students, labs, support staff who can conduct, and probably, co-PIs, other PIs as well, to pitch in for doing the actual work. I think it also depends on what type of field you're in. There may be, contract research organizations that can help with some of the implementation of the experiments in there. So those are initial thoughts on that. How about you, Meg?
I love that idea of of pulling in other people to do it. My thought was that many great partnerships in biomedical research occur between the person who loves to write and the person who loves to do the research. So you may want to think about collaborating with people who hate writing grant applications. And once you're past the ESI stage, most of your R01s are going to be multi-PI plans. That's just like the nature of NIH at the moment. It hasn't always been the case, but that is what's happening now. And like, when I think back to the department chair in my department when I was working on my doctorate, was a person who rarely entered the lab. He was masterful at going to NIH and working the room and writing grant applications and writing manuscripts. And he rarely entered the lab. And he wound up landing so much money that he structured his lab, I think initially with a lot of postdocs. And then to make it even more sustainable, he wound up hiring a master's level technician who was almost like a mini lab chief. The guy didn't have a PhD, but he was incredibly smart. He loved doing research. He was really good at organizing things. And he let this guy write papers and be first author on these papers. And they had like a beautiful marriage in their setup where, the actual lab chief was writing grant applications and this technician was the one doing most of the work. So there are many ways to structure your career. And I would say this is actually a nice problem to have because liking grant writing is probably the more rare thing. I think most people like doing the work itself. And I think it's much less common that people are like, ooh, let me write a grant application. Usually that's just kind of an onerous task, that they have to do in order to get back to their passion, which is doing the work. So I think you may be able to structure this in a way where you can find other people to do the work, and you talk about planning the projects with them and you oversee the projects, but other people are actually doing it, and then you're off writing grant applications and everybody's happy. So that could work out quite nicely for you. Okay, so I'm not seeing another question in the Q&A box, so I'm going to go back to one that I received by email. And this is kind of abridged. It was a much longer and more detailed question, but I'm a postdoc from a European country who is now a resident in the US. I'm a little bit lost about how to identify the grants to which I can apply. I would appreciate any help or guidance with this. So my suggestion to this person by email was to start with the F32 mechanism. So the F series is for pre and postdoctoral grant applicants. So the Fs look kind of like a mini K. There's like a career development, like a mentored piece, and then there's like a little project, but both of those are kind of scaled down. And the F31 is pre-doc, F32 is postdoc. So that might be a good place to start. And at NIH, there are these pages called kiosks, so it's like you can Google the NIH F kiosk or the NIH K kiosk, as if there's like an actual booth there with the person like handing out material and little pieces of chocolate. So depending on how far along you are in your postdoc, you might also consider a K mechanism. So the eligibility of different types of Ks vary, so you might look at that. There is an infographic that's in, I wonder if I could pull it up really quickly, but that shows, hold on, career stage. Which mechanism? It shows mechanisms you might consider by career stage. And I use it in my trainings. Oh, I do have it. Wow, that was shocking that I was able to do that. Okay, so let me screen share this. So support by career stage. So you can see grad student, postdoc, the F32, the K01, the K25, K22. And as you're transitioning into the faculty position, I don't know if people can see this. Maybe this is too small. I'm going to drop this link into the chat. But those were some of the ones that that was my suggestion for what this person might consider. Does anybody else have any suggestions for that? Let me see. I'm going to pull up the chat and just drop that link in there. Oh, nope. That only went to panelists. Sorry. Let me send that to everyone. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so that, and that's also, they have a separate one for people who are, have a clinical degree, like an MD or otherwise. And it kind of gives you a sense of like the different stages and what you might consider applying for at any of those stages. So hopefully that is helpful. Do people have other questions before we sign off? I'm just going to look and see what our next sessions are. So November 15th, we're actually not going to have an AGE session because I'm going to be out of the country taking a much needed vacation after a crazy cycle 3. And then as soon as I come back right before Thanksgiving, I'm going to be gearing up for cycle 1 2024 because it's already upon us to start preparing. And then on November 29th, I am going to be presenting on how to use the NIH Reporter website to vet your K or R project idea and prepare to write. So that's going to be our session for November 29th. But if other people have suggestions for sessions, just let us know. We're always happy to take suggestions for mini tutorials or guests. And I want to thank Agnella so much for coming, and please go ahead and check out her blog post. And if you're interested in any help on manuscript writing, take a look at her services. So, and Agnella, I hope you come visit with us again.
Thank you very much, Meg, for having me. This was great, and I'd be happy to come back, be on AGE again. Enjoy your vacation.
Thanks so much. Take care, everybody. Good luck with your grant writing. Bye-bye.
Bye.